Hey everybody, welcome to Conquest of Aya. And for today's video, we're going to go over one of the new one-player starter sets that just got newly released by Para Bellum. And the starter set we're going to cover first is going to be the Spires. Spires is one of the armies that I've been playing recently and have been having a great time. It's actually one of the factions lore that got me into Conquest, because back in the original starter set, it was 100 Kingdoms and Spires. Definitely different models. They're in this one-player starter set. But I saw the models, I thought they were interesting. Kind of at first I thought they were like mummies or something wrapped up, but actually you see all the wrapping around some of the things, not actually in this one-player starter set, but for the force-grown drones, it was medical gauze, I learned as I looked at the lore, because they created these really, really low-class chaff for their army, basically, that had a lifespan of a few weeks and was basically built just to be a mass of bodies on the battlefield. And that level of like callousness really intrigued me about this faction. And the more you read about the Spires, the more you know that they're definitely the bad guys in Last Argument of Kings. So the Spires are kind of the elves of the Conquest lore background. And I know people are looking at these like, these models don't look like elves at all, but they are the kind of the long-living faction beings, I guess. They're actually not even from the planet of Aya, where Conquest is set on. They came from another planet because there was something real bad happening there, and they were fleeing that, and they were trying to get to colonize Aya, basically. But before they could bring their entire warrior class and everybody over, they basically just brought over their scientists and the workers and people you would send to, like, do a typical colonization of another land or nation. But before they could bring over their full military might, the portal or the way back to their homeworld was destroyed by someone known as Sovereign. And he said, basically, it's real bad back there. You gotta take my word on it. There's no way to prove it. I'm cutting the portal off. So he tried to spin it like he was doing them a great favor, but it kind of left him in charge, so some people are suspicious. And so if you're looking to play the bad guys in the game, or the faction that is basically manipulating the rest of Aya, behind the scenes the Spires are involved in everything that's going on in the setting, the Spires are definitely for you. So we're going to look at the one-player starter set, what you get, how you can build a Spires army using this set pretty quickly and efficiently. It's not super expensive. It retails at $149.99, and you get 40 miniatures. It's basically an entire warband of the High Clone Executor, and we'll go over and we'll look at the miniatures here in a minute. And if you're interested in picking up the Spires one-player starter set, or any of the one-player starter sets from Para Bellum, there will be two links below, one for the US store and one for the EU store. And if you use those links and use the code Conquest of Aya while you're checking out, you'll get 10% off your order of any products, not just the starter sets, but the starter sets are included as well, which is awesome. I really appreciate if you guys are looking for Conquest miniatures, if you could use the link and the code. I get a small kickback from Para Bellum, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate you guys watching, and definitely that's a great way to support the channel. And if you want to support us a little more, just go ahead and use the code over when you buy your Conquest product. So as you can see, you get 4 regiments and a character of the High Clone Executor in the one-player starter set. So the High Clone Executor, he can be built, depending on what upgrade you give him, as a really good melee beater. He's got an awesome supremacy ability, which is like his warlord ability, which we'll take a look at when I show you guys the army builder. He can also be built as a ranged threat if you want to put him in a ranged unit. And you do get the option to make 2 ranged units with this starter set. The good thing about a lot of the Para Bellum stuff is they're dual kits. And even in their starter sets, it comes with the bits that you need to make both types of units. For example, you get Vanguard Clone Infiltrators. They're the guys at the top right there that you see with the swords and shields. And they're kind of your elite infantry with a ton of attacks, but they don't really have a lot of cleave to cleave through other people's armor. But that kit can also be made as Vanguard Clone Infiltrators, which have dual hand crossbows, who their number of shots just got nerfed a little bit, but they're still very, very good. And the High Clone Executor can fit perfectly in there with some upgrades to have a really, really heavy shooting list that you could build just from buying this box. You're also going to get some marksman clones. you can see on the bottom left. They're awesome because they get so many shots because the Spires made them as they bred them basically to have an extra arm to shoot their bows faster, which is another reason I really like the Spires faction. Next, you're going to get a regiment of either what's pictured here are bound clones. They're one step up from those force-grown drones I was talking about earlier. The guys wrapped up in the medical gauze. These are actually frontline troops. You can make them very, very defensive, and they have spears, so they'll get to fight in multiple ranks, which is cool. You can also make these guys onslaught drones, which are less defensive and all about, as the name implies, just an onslaught of a lot of attacks and fighting and trying to kill your opponent through just sheer number of attacks, basically. And last, you'll get the bigger guys that you see there, the brute drones. I absolutely love these guys in the game right now. They have a ton of attacks, flurry, which lets them reroll their missed hits, and they're hard to kill and put morale wounds through. They'll just come as they are if you just play with this kit, because the High Clone Executor can't join that unit. He can join any of the other three. Though because they're brutes and he's an infantry character, he just can't join them to kind of buff up their fighting power. And as you can see here, you're going to get almost 700 points out of a 2,000 point full army from the Spires one-player starter set. And that's without any upgrades and just bare minimum stands of what you get. They do come in the dual kits, like I said, the Vanguard, Clone Infiltrators, and Bound Clones, but you want to be careful how you build them. If this is the first thing you're buying from your Spires, you kind of want to build them in this way to make it illegal to play with Warband. Because while you could build them as Vanguard Clone Infiltrators, you can only take 2 restricted. You can see the red box around here in this army builder that shows that the unit is restricted. You can only take 1 restricted option for each mainstay option with the green box you see here. And as you can see, when I open this up, for the High Clone Executor, Bound Clones, Force-Grown Drones, and Vanguard Clones are your mainstays, and those Vanguard Clone Infiltrators are going to be your restricted, along with Marksman and Brute Drones. So it is possible to build things from this that you wouldn't necessarily be able to throw all in one warband, and it might mess up your list building later. And the Onslaught Drones actually can't even be taken by the High Clone Executor. Those can only be taken by the Ferromancer. But that's just a character that you buy later down the road. You're going to want a Ferromancer anyway, and a Biomancer, so just know that going in, that kind of building it from the box is the best way to go if you're just starting. And there is a pamphlet in the box that kind of tells you how it should be built to build this warband out, and even explanations of how you can kind of flesh out the army to get to 1,000 points and 2,000 points from there. So if you're just starting out in Conquest and you've never played a game, and you're not interested in the Nords or the City-States, those are the 2 factions that come in the 2-player starter set. These 1-player starter sets are definitely enough to play a game on a 4x4 table. It definitely will be a smaller game, but it's 4 units and a character. You're going to get the entire Conquest experience of playing the card activations. You're going to have range units. You're going to have the High Clone Executor. Well, the only thing you're not going to have is really a spellcaster. But some of the 1-player starter sets do come with that. But you're going to feel the full experience of the game just playing the starter set. But it's not a full game, so you'll want to obviously build up more and more over time. But this is a great starting spot for the Spires. It gives you a full warband right out of the box that you can build. It's even good if you maybe were an older Spires player that you bought, and you have a ton of Force-Grown Drones like me. I think I have like 80 of them lying around just because that's what came in the old starter set. And these are some of the more elite units that you don't really need too many of, other than I would say the Bound Clones, that you can add on to your Spires forces. So this 1-player starter set's an awesome pick, and I really like how Para Bellum went to a more focused approach to these starter sets. As you can see, it's a full warband. When you buy it, it just is a warband. There's no, finagling or getting other characters to try and make it work within the game, which is a really, really smart move selling these to newer players coming in. Okay, that's enough about how good I think the units that are in the box from like a newer player standpoint is. Let's look at what do they actually do on the tabletop. So the High Clone Executor, you can click on him and he'll pull up his stats, which is not super important what his stats are right now, especially if you're a newer player. But he gets right off the bat flawless strikes, which any ones he rolls to hit in a clash or a duel automatically count your opponent's defense as 0. So even if you make him as that shooting character, he's not defenseless in close combat, and he gets cleave 1 to cleave through a little bit of armor. So if he's your warlord, which a lot of times he is my warlord when I play Spires, even at a full game level, he's going to get an awesome supremacy ability called Coordinated Assault. So in Conquest, if you play, obviously you're going to know this, but if you're a brand new player, it's a you go, I go system based off a deck of cards that each unit you put in your army adds a card to your deck, and you stack it before the round starts, and that's how it goes. And sometimes this can, you flipped a couple cards and you realize you've made a terrible mistake, and your opponent has not arranged his cards in a way that you thought he would, and your units aren't going to go when you want them to. The High Clone Executor's ability lets you go with 3 cards the first time that you would draw. So if you go first, you go 3 times before your opponent goes once. And if you go second, your opponent goes once, you go 3 times before they go again. Obviously, that's incredibly powerful. It's once per game, and it can absolutely win you games or swing it back from you're definitely going to lose to now you're in it. It's not very fun for your opponent sometimes, I'll be honest. But if you use this in the right spot, it's definitely one of the most powerful abilities in the entire game right now. And the units you're going to get, assuming you build them as Vanguard clones, Bound clones, Brute drones, and Marksman clones. The Vanguard clones can get up to a defense of 4 with the defense 2 with a shield and with a command model to give them the Bastion special rule. They have Vanguard that lets them move an additional time when they move onto the board, so they can move up to 19 inches coming onto the board with a standard, which is super far, so they'll be able to hold some objectives for you. And with 4 wounds is pretty average for an infantry stand, but that attack 6, 4 is again the average, so they have way more attacks than your normal infantry. And they get a nice little bonus of evasion too. So defense can be altered with like that High Clone Executor's cleave that you saw would bring these guys down to defense just 1, assuming they didn't have their shields or their Bastion up. But that evasion you always get. Nothing can affect evasion, you can't subtract it. So you're always going to get at least a 2 save on the Vanguard clones, which is really cool. Next you get Bound clones. You'll notice they're a little cheaper. Their clash is the same, so they're hitting just as good as the Vanguard clones, but you'll see their attacks are a little less. They have 1 less evasion, and their defense can get up there because they have a shield to 4 as well. But they also have that support 2 special rule, which means usually if you're not in the front rank fighting in Conquest, you just get 1 support attack for the stand. But these guys will get 2 attacks, so their attacks can actually add up just as high as those Vanguard clones who don't have the support rule. And next we got the big old Brute drones. You can see these guys are 5 attacks, 5 wounds a stand, with 4 resolve, which is very high, so you're not going to take as much damage for morale, and a flat 3 defense, which is good. But they also get Unstoppable, so they can reroll their charges, Flurry, so they reroll all their missed hits, which is great, because when they charge, they'll be up at that Clash 3, so hitting on 3s and below. And Oblivious, which means they need to fail 2 resolve tests to take morale damage as opposed to 1 from other units. So they're actually really, really resilient with that defense 3 and 5 wounds because they're not going to be taking much damage from the morale tests. And they move 6, so they're not super slow. So these are just little melee blunders you can throw into your opponent's units. And last, we have the Marksman clones. They have Barrage 5 per stand, so that means for your 3 stands you're going to get 15 shots plus a leader model, so you're going to get 16 shots, all the way out to range 22, which I think is the longest in the game. It's close to the longest in the game if it's not the longest. And it has Arcing Fire, which means you take an action, and then your next action can be to shoot, and you can shoot over top of your units or enemy units, as long as 1 other unit in your army has line of sight to that target. So they're kind of reeling back like, hey, they're here, arc the arrows up over top of us into them. And that lets these Marksman clones be perfect for sitting on back objectives and just raining fire down on your opponent's units. Our overview of the Spires 1-player starter set that's out now from Para Bellum over on their web store. All these 1-player starter sets are a really great way to get into the game and a great way to supplement your faction if you already have, a small Spires army or something like that. They also come with both the First Blood and Last Army Kings 2.0 rulebooks, as you can see here in the picture, which is everything you need to start playing right out of the box. So if you're looking to get into Conquest, I absolutely recommend this is where you start. If you don't like either of the factions in the 2-player starter set, which obviously that's even a better deal because you can split that between 2 people, these 1-player starter sets are amazing, and none of them are going to lead you wrong, and you're not going to buy any units out of these or have any units out of these that are going to be dead weight basically and just sit on your shelves. You're going to use all of these, even all the way up to your 2,000 point armies. These models are going to stick around, so you're not going to feel like you had a wasted purchase basically. Thanks for listening, everybody. And then we're going to keep covering the 1-player starter sets kind of with more regular videos here. I'll probably have one out tomorrow. We'll do the 100 Kingdoms next just because that's another faction I play. And we'll go over that starter set and see how you can kind of expand from there. And if it's a good way to start your Conquest journey, which, spoilers, it obviously is. I love these starter sets. So good luck in your Conquest games out there, and I'll see you next time.